A warm welcome to all of you who have joined us this evening from all across Scotland after probably what's been a very busy day for you all in your settings. As you can see from the PowerPoint that the session's being recorded, and we're just asking everyone to keep their microphones and cameras off at the moment in order to reduce the bandwidth with the cameras, and obviously so that we don't distract everyone from the session this evening. So I'm really delighted to be here tonight. This is our second session in combination. So this is a session from Education Scotland and the Scottish Childminding Association, and we've been working in partnership to deliver these a set of 3 sessions, and this is the second one. So my name's Katrina Gill, and I am Education Officer with Education Scotland, and my remit is for early years. I'm really delighted to be speaking to you as childminders. I think childminding has been a really important part of my life as a parent. I very much made the decision to choose a childminder for my children when we were looking for somebody to take care of them when they were very small, as I felt that like the kind of care that you can offer in those small sort of family type settings is really what I wanted for my children. So I very much value the work that you do for all of the children and families that you take care of. I'm also absolutely delighted to have my colleague from SCMA, Susanna Knox, with me tonight. And Susanna, would you like to just introduce yourself and say a few words?
Well, good evening, everyone, and I know it's probably been a really long day. My name's Susanna Knox, and I am the Professional Learning Manager for the Scottish Childminding Association, and I'm delighted to see so many of you have made the effort to come along tonight, and I hope Katrina and I can make it an interesting session for you. Hopefully you'll have lots of questions.
Lovely. Thank you, Susanna. So we'll just get started. So the aims of the session tonight are to think about the term pedagogy, and we're going to explore the nature of child-centred play pedagogy, and we're going to look at the child-centred pedagogy and practice cycle, which is in realising the ambition, in a bit more detail. And then we're going to really think about pedagogical leadership and what that really means for you in your childminding setting. And Susanna and I are going to sort of take turns during the presentation, and we'll be sort of passing the baton backwards and forwards. So first of all, let's have a think about what pedagogy is. Pedagogy is not the same as teaching. It's a much broader term than teaching. It stems from the Greek term pedos, which means boy or child, and agogos, which means leader. And Juno Sullivan calls it the process of leading a child to learning. And I think that's a really nice way of thinking about pedagogy. And so our pedagogy is the approach that we take and the choices that we make based on our understanding of how children learn and develop. It's about the interactions and the experiences that will be supporting the curriculum, and it's about that process of how children learn. And obviously, at the last session, Alan talked about curriculum, and we can't really separate what the curriculum is from what we do and the actions that we take as educators to support children as they grow and develop. And for us in the early years, play is really the bedrock of our pedagogical approach. And hopefully also that is going beyond very young children. And it's a really fabulous way that I think all human beings learn, through playing, even us as adults. What's really important is that children need to be able to shape their own learning so that they can have agency and they can have ownership of their learning. They need lots of different kinds of opportunities to develop as symbol users and symbol makers, and they need rich real life experiences to draw on, because children need experiences in order to be able to play. And that's one of the things I think the great strengths of childminding is that actually you can offer children a very wide range of real life experiences that are part of that day-to-day, part and parcel of your work with families. The other thing, of course, about play pedagogy, that it needs really skilled educators, educators who know when to step in and support and when to stand back, when to teach a skill and when to allow children to explore on their own. And you are the experts in that. You are doing that minute by minute, day by day. And it's a very skilled job. And I think people don't maybe realise just how skilled a job it is. And really, when we think about that word pedagogy, it's the what we do. That's the heart of what we mean when we're sort of trying to define the word. It's the ethos that we have, the values that we have, and the way that we create our settings, we set them up. All of those aspects will be part of that pedagogy and that pedagogical approach. So now I'm going to hope that we have a little bit of film, and this is June O'Sullivan that I mentioned talking about pedagogy. And so hopefully you'll be able to hear this. Susanna, you might be able to let me know if not, but it should be set up to play.
Really interested in something you said about putting pedagogy at the heart of the curriculum, and I wondered if you could just explain that a bit more for us.
I guess pedagogy is really about leading to learning, and I think often people think about it as a kind of scary thing. Do you remember the days when we introduced the word curriculum? Mm-hmm. And everyone was really scared by it? And so I think pedagogy is about understanding that actually it's what we do to support the children to lead them to learning that is actually quite significant. Because it's easy to get caught up today. You know, education is really policy driven today, and so often what happens is the child, which is what it's all about, is actually gets a bit lost. So I think having a conversation that gets people to think about pedagogy as a central point is actually quite significant, and it puts it right back at the heart of it, because actually it's about the children.
I think that's just a lovely way to think about pedagogy, really, isn't it? It's all that we do to lead children to learning, and it's about keeping children at the heart. And I think that for us in Scotland is very much about our approach in the early years of children's lives, and realising the ambition, the fact that it's not just called realising the ambition, it's called realising the ambition being me, because it's about keeping that child right at the heart of it. So in section 6 of Realising the Ambition, we have a whole section that's focused on child-centred pedagogy and about putting that pedagogy into practice. And in particular, we're looking at what we might call play pedagogy or child-centred pedagogy. And this quote here talks about, for it to be effective, we need to have that sort of shared understanding about the value of play. And of course, that shared understanding needs to be built up and developed with the families that you're working with, you know, and that's a really important role that you have in helping them understand how you're approaching and supporting their children's learning and development. You will also see as we go through this that we will be looking at responsive and intentional planning, about how we have meaningful observation, so that listening with your eyes and ears, and how you might document some of that learning. And we'll also think about the interactions, experiences and the spaces of learning, and that learning environment, which is more than just the resources that you have, but it's about the experiences that you offer and the way that you interact with the children. So it's really important, I think, that, you know, with that quote that talks about the value of play, that it's about really taking the lead from the children and responding to their needs. And so it's about really being sure about the importance and understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And play pedagogy really offers children opportunities to learn in real life contexts that are not separated into curriculum subjects. So, you know, we talked last week about that holistic idea of the curriculum and how you can link those subjects, because obviously we have that curriculum for excellence with the 8 subject areas. actually you know that when you're working with children and you're observing children, that they're not learning in neat little compartments. They're learning all sorts of different parts of the curriculum at the same time. And play pedagogy really allows children to investigate, to explore, to observe what's happening and to imitate others as well through their play. Now I'm going to hand over to you, Susanna, for this next slide.
So recognising the value of play. While it's really important that we understand pedagogy, it's just as important that others involved in the child's life understand how important play really is. So many times we hear play being dismissed, or comments like, oh, he goes to nursery to learn and he goes to the childminders to play. As pedagogical leaders, we should be sharing our best practice, but also helping others to understand the importance of that practice. So think about a simple walk in the park after it's been raining. I'm sure, like me, you've encouraged many children to run and jump in puddles, and we all know what great fun that is. But I'm sure you'll also have shared many pictures with parents of their children doing just that. So while sharing that with the parent and showing the joy the child felt, it would be worth reminding the parent that this is also helping the child's brain to develop. A child's neurological system is naturally designed to seek out sensory input, and it needs it in order to develop into a strong and capable individual. So if a child, for example, is spinning in circles just for fun, it's because he or she needs that sensory input. Movement and physical play help the development of new connections in the brain cells and overall organisation of the brain. And as these connections start to develop, the child's fine and gross motor skills, their socialisation, their personal awareness, their language, creativity, problem solving and learning ability are improved as well. This is why children need to splash in muddy puddles, along with lots of other outdoor pursuits like tree climbing and acorn sourcing. These are all natural and necessary experiences that will encourage their cognitive skills development. Sharing this with parents about the importance of play is showing yourself to be a leader for family learning as well as the children's learning. Parents see that their child loves the outdoors, which may encourage them to rethink a family day out and what that should really look like. Lots of times we hear parents say, oh, he doesn't like to do that. He just likes to sit and look at his iPad, or he likes to play a game or stay inside. And by showing them how much their children enjoy the outdoors, we can lead them in that direction as well. Next slide, please. So how children learn. So this list that you're seeing on the screen just now was created by Julie Fisher, who's an independent early years advisor and visiting professor of early childhood education at Oxford Brookes University. And it brings together the work of a number of theorists who have tried to explain how children learn. It draws on fundamental work by Piaget, Vygotsky, Brunner and Bruce, and there are some of the most robust and evidence-backed theories about how children learn. And it's important to think about how children learn because this will inform our pedagogical approach and support us to think about the learning environment that we provide within our service. So young children learn by being active. The phrase being active really means two things. The first is the most obvious and refers to the physical movement of a child. And young children require lots of opportunities to move their bodies in order to develop balance and spatial awareness and core strength, all the gross and fine motor skills that lead to, for example, being able to sit still in a chair or on a floor or write with any control with their hands. Secondly, being active refers to the engaging actively with experiences, not passively having things happen around them or to them or listening for long periods to some of them and telling them things to do and what they should be doing. Children continually bring what they know and understand to new situations and they apply their skills, competence and construct their own understanding of the world. This gives children a sense of agency and autonomy, which goes much further and deeper than independence. It goes to the core of who they really are and who they'll become. Young children learn by exploring investigation. From birth, young children are learning through exploring and investigating their world. They use all their senses to explore, making links between what they know and what is new. They constantly ask questions and seek solutions. Along the way, they make mistakes, but trial and error is how they learn. I always like to think of this as the word fail, here as first attempt to learn. This way of learning is a highly creative and is based on a strong ability for different thinking, which we need to support and build on. Otherwise, our ability to do this decreases. Young children learn by playing. There's a wealth of research and no real question about whether children learn by playing, although there are different ideas about what play actually is. And we know that play is a right and is enshrined in Article 31 of UNCRC, the United Nations Charter for the Rights of Children. Young children learn by using language. Language is a way that we act on and interact with the world, but it also enables us to reflect on our actions in order to understand them. Piaget felt language was symbolic, allowing them to venture beyond the here and now and talk about such things as the past, the future, people, feelings and events. And Vygotsky believed that language transforms the way we learn, think and understand, and as such is a tool of thought. The ability to represent our ideas and thoughts and share them with others is the basis for writing and reading. In addition to the development of language, it also supports the development of metacognition, which is what enables understanding, analysis, and the control of one's cognitive processes, especially when engaged in learning. Almost like a saying, we can see the cogs moving. Thought, language, and understanding are inextricably bound together and are successfully developed through experiences that are meaningful to that child. Young children learn by interacting with others. We all know how social children can be. They're very social beings and they learn while they're building relationships, not only with you, but with the other children within your service. The social and cultural context in which they grow up informs their understanding of the world. By playing, talking and living alongside others, children can copy and question and make meaning of experiences. We see that all the time in role play with children. So Curriculum for Excellence is a socially constructed curriculum, and what that means is it's built on the understanding of the importance of relationships. And we know that children learn best when they interact socially, when they have the benefit of forging positive relationships with their peers and others. So if young children learn naturally by being active and engaging in a range of exploratory experiences, if they learn through play and using language and interacting with others, then the primary responsibility of you, the childminder, is to plan opportunities that facilitate and support these instinctive strategies. And this is what we call pedagogy. Next slide, please.
I think this is me now, thanks.
It
Susanna.
is.
Great. Okay, so Alan showed you this cycle at the last session. You may not have all been to the last session, but this sketch note can be found on page 48 and also on page 64 of Realising the Ambition. And it really is exploring what that child-centred or play pedagogy can look like in practice. And it includes key questions to help you reflect and think about that, how that might relate to your practice. It speaks really importantly of the role of the adult and that interplay of being both intentional and responsive in practice. So planning things beforehand, but also responding while you're in that moment. And as the complexity of a child's play develops, the learning is facilitated through this kind of cycle, through this cyclical process. And so it goes round and round. It's difficult to know where the starting point of it is, but you would have that responsive and intentional planning, which would have been informed by your observations and how you might document those observations. And that would have been viewed within that learning environment where we have those interactions, experiences, and a variety of different kinds of spaces. Curriculum for Excellence really intends to build on the child's existing skills, their attributes and their competencies. And so the curriculum that you're offering needs to be relevant and responsive and continuous. Now, I know many of you have got children that are younger than 3, and so you're not necessarily with those children thinking so much about Curriculum for Excellence, but you are still offering experiences that are relevant, responsive and continuous for the children that they are building on, and you're scaffolding their learning through those interactions and experiences in the spaces that will deepen their learning and extend their thinking. And really that view of a child as an active participant in their own development is really important. It's like a dance between the child and their peers and the adults. It's not just something that we do to children. So if we are thinking about this cycle, then let's have a wee bit of a look at it in a bit more detail. So let's start with our learning environment. So throughout realising the ambition, we use this sort of phrase, interactions, experiences and spaces. And it's really important that we know the purpose and the possibilities of the spaces that we're providing for our children. So every learning environment, both the indoors environment and the outdoors environment, in terms of those interactions, experiences and spaces, tell us a story about how play is valued. So if everything is out of a child's reach and they've always got to ask for something, then that tells us something about how we value a child's curiosity and creativity, because we are controlling those aspects. However, if you're out in the garden and the child has the opportunity to explore the whole of that space and make decisions about what they're going to do and where they're going to go, then that tells a different story about how play is valued. So in addition to this, the attitudes that we have about what and how children learn are really the key to knowing our children as learners. And the curriculum is the what and the pedagogy is the how. And really it's about believing that the child knows how they learn best, and they'll tell us that through their actions, through their emotions and through their words, when the learning that they're faced for is not right for them. And I'm sure all of you will be able to think of a moment where you've planned something and you've really thought it through and you've maybe gone and got all sorts of different things, and then the child wasn't very interested in it and went off to do something else. So excuse me, I have a sneeze there. So it's really important that we listen to children and observe what they're telling us. And we really need to be open-minded. We need to be open-minded about our pedagogy and about the possibilities for children. That possibility approach will offer children experiences that will stimulate them, will involve that risk-taking, that opportunity for failure, like Susanna talked about. Actually, it's about a first attempt at sort of learning something, and also opportunities, of course, for success. And ideally from this as well, we'll see the emergence of divergent thinkers. We want our young people to, clicking all over the place. We want our young children to be divergent thinkers, to be creative, to not be all the same. Children are not robots, they're unique human beings, and we want to encourage and develop that. To support that cognitive development of the child's brain, the learning environment needs to be really rich in opportunities for children to engage with concepts, to foster skills for learning, such as reasoning, creativity, problem solving. And the choice of experiences that you're offering kind of needs to reflect an environment of open-ended possibilities, so that children can feel motivated from within themselves to explore and investigate it, and including taking those kind of calculated risks. So it's about, when we think about open-ended possibilities, it's not about having sort of set up activities that can only really be done in one way and have a beginning and an end. We want to offer children experiences that they can explore, that they can take in different directions and follow their interests through them. And through these interactions, experiences and spaces, really we're talking about facilitation, and that's really the role of the adult. And it's that skill of stepping in and stepping back in your interactions. When do I step back and let the child do it? When do I join in, or when do I offer some support or a suggestion or an idea, or when do I teach a skill? Those flexible experiences are allowing you to learn from the child, and that will inform what you're going to do next. It might be that the child has been exploring something outside in the garden, and you're thinking, oh, right, next week we could go and take a little trip somewhere and explore that a bit further in a different space or a different environment. So really kind of helping the child to follow and develop their interests is informing your practice and your planning. And then obviously that variety of spaces, your indoor space and your outdoor space and all of those other spaces that you're going to go. You may be taking daily trips down to pick up and drop off children at school. So you're going on walks, you may be getting on a bus or going in a car, and all of those experiences are where children are learning, and they're really, really important and vital. So it's through this process of reflecting that practitioners are able to facilitate the right kinds of interactions and experiences and really consider the spaces that you're going to create and set up, both outdoors and indoors, that are going to extend and consolidate children's learning. Hand over to Susanna.
So we think back to the earlier slide where we talked about how children learn through being active, exploring, investigating, by playing, by using language, and by interacting with each other and ourselves. And we need to understand that the primary responsibility of the childminder is to plan opportunities that facilitate and support these instinctive strategies that children have built into them. So children need a range of play experiences and resources that are of good quality. They need space to move about, to experiment, to create and to play. They need a learning environment that offers concrete experiences that are relevant, meaningful and worthy of their interest and their involvement in it. We all know that we can, as Katrina said, we could set up something that we think looks absolutely amazing, but then the children come along and it lasts about 10 seconds and then they move on to something that they're really interested in. Natural materials have infinite possibilities and the power to be really transformative in your setting. They're beautiful, they're lovely to touch, and they're very often free. They support the development of symbolic representation, which is the foundation of everything, being able to represent our ideas and our thoughts in abstract ways, such as how we speak and how we write. And it's part of what makes us human beings. Children should have the opportunity to explore and investigate both indoors and out. And the real world needs to be brought in to enable children's experiences to be meaningful. What's the point of writing a letter or having a post office role play if you don't have any experience of what a letter might be and if you've never been to visit a post office? This is one of the areas that childminding really comes into its own as a home from home environment. Rather than a sand table, childminders go to a beach. And rather than a tough tray with a few pine cones or twigs, it's a forest with all its hidden nooks and crannies. Childminders excel at using the outside world and everything that it has to offer children to help them to explore. Environments should be developed with the input of children because it gives them a sense of personal investment and control. There's so much more learning involved if children are enabled to create and develop their own spaces alongside you, to contribute their ideas and to influence what and how they learn. When they gain autonomy from that, it helps them to gain resilience and self-confidence. This type of participatory pedagogy, 2 P's in a row, is what we mean when we talk about the child's voice. The learning environment is not just the resources or the displays or the photographs we send to parents of finished arts and crafts pieces, but it's also the interactions and experiences that children have. I always feel that sometimes we look on the internet or we look on Facebook and we see people and it's like Mother's Day and Father's Day and Christmas and people have got these perfect things that they're sending home with the children. And I always think to myself, yes, that's lovely, but where are the pictures of the children with their hands in the paint and the glue. I always think when we see these pictures, which we see a lot of with childminders, that these are the children that are really learning from that and that creation that they are creating. So it's not the end product for them, it's in the doing that the learning is enriched, not what gets sent home. So the environment is about interactions, it's about experiences, and it's about spaces that we have together.
Thanks,
Back
Susanna.
to Katrina.
We're a good double act, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next part of the cycle. So this is where we look at observation, interpretation and documentation of learning. So it's really, obviously, you know, we've talked about it quite a lot, about how important it is to offer children interactions, experiences and spaces that are developmentally appropriate. Now, of course, one way to do this might be to consult a list of sort of milestones for given ages and stages and provide things that might match this. But actually, this kind of approach can really kind of put us into a sort of more of a tick box focus. Oh, we've got that, we've done that. And it doesn't really represent the sort of repetitive and schematic nature of a young child's learning. You know, young children often need to repeat experiences and actions to deepen their learning. And I'm sure, you know, you will see that daily, children, you know, really doing the same kinds of things. They might be doing them in different places. It might be that they're transporting things, but they'll be transporting things in the garden and indoors or in and out, and you know they need to do that over and over again in order to really you know embed that kind of learning. So by following a child's interests and their motivations, then that will help us to be on the right level for children. And in that considered, responsive and intentional learning environment, children are going to find interesting things to do that match their current needs. So really, it's really important that we know what children are doing. You know, what are they doing in the garden? What are they doing inside your house? What are they doing when you're going out to pick up on the way to school? And by observing children, that's how we know what children are learning, what their progress is, what their interests are. And I think we can think of observation as noticing and trying to interpret what children's actions, emotions and words mean in terms of what they're learning. So we can really observe what they're mastering and what they still need help with, or some guidance, or what they need to practice. And that informal sort of ongoing approach is really, I suppose the word would be like tuning into the child and really then supporting their learning. Okay, Susanna?
So Tina Bruce uses the phrase observe, support and expand learning. And I think that sums it up quite nicely. This is so important within your work as a childminder. Observe the children, support them however they need support, and from developing emotional and social understanding, scaffold their developing thinking and expand their learning. So some observations may be written down, but there'll be plenty of times when things are noticed and remembered during the day. Little aha moments, I like to call them. Taking photographs that can be reflected on can be a good reminder, and there's no set way to document learning. Floor books, learning displays, individual folders, learning journals, they're all different ways of recording and documenting learning. What's important is that whatever the format, the children are able to reflect on their learning and to add their own thoughts and ideas into the documentation. I know I personally found the children in my care loved floor books and having personal ownership of them and what went into them. There was always great excitement when the floor book came out and the coloured pens came out and the stickers came out and the glitter came out and the photograph came out and everything else got added in. So the role of the adult is a delicate balance of supporting, enriching and proposing on one hand and keeping back to give to the children space and time to build their own ideas on the other. So Barbara Rogoff describes learning as a cooperative process between children and adults, where children borrow adult knowledge and skills. And at any given moment, the lead and responsibility passes back and forth. From the adult's point of view, one can imagine this as a ladder that they go up and down, always aware of the child's interest and initiative. And that comes from realising the ambition. Katrina.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's move on to the next part of the cycle, the third part. So child-centred play pedagogy starts with the child, and I think we've said that already, but we can't, I think, overstate that. And what children know and what children can do really determines the experiences that are planned for their development. And so this cycle suggests to us that this responsive and intentional planning is informed by the child's actions, by their emotions, and by their words. And these will inform our decisions about what needs to stay to reinforce development and learning, and what needs to change to inspire new learning and development. Children learn best when it's relevant and it makes sense. So starting from their interests and ideas provides that important context for their learning. And we know that there's that necessity for you, the skilled supportive adult, to help consolidate and extend the learning. And from that socio-constructive perspective, and we talked about that at the beginning, about how Curriculum for Excellence is a socio-constructive curriculum based in relationships, it's essential that children learn from each other and from adults who know more than them. Children benefit from adult support, and so it's really important that we see play pedagogy as a balance between child-initiated, adult-initiated and adult-directed learning. I think it's about that knowing when to teach a particular skill if a child is struggling with something, or where you might put out some resources to inspire children to then take it forward and lead it themselves. And it's about that. It sort of shifts backwards and forwards, and sometimes you're leading, sometimes the child's leading. And that's absolutely appropriate. And sometimes, there are things in your day routines that have to happen. And, if you're picking children up from school, for instance, you need to leave the house at a certain time and you need to go down the road and pick them up. So that has to be led by the adult. A 3-year-old's not going to go, oh, it's time to go to school. So it's about that balance between, and there's a really important place for both. Hey, Susanna again.
So it's important that every activity that takes place, both outdoors and indoors, must be seen by adults and by the children as to be as important as all the others. So for example, it's just as important to go and pick children up from school and be part of that routine as it is to play in the sand or take a walk in the park. Each has its own special purpose. Each offers the child a different way of learning, and the adults a different perspective on their children as learners. And the role of the adult is just as important in child-initiated and adult-initiated learning as it is in adult-led learning. So it's important to understand how the role changes subtly but significantly as you move from supporting one kind of learning to supporting others. So an example of that would be when encountering something new, a child may need lots of adult support at the start to engage, but as the child becomes more comfortable and begins to explore, the adult needs to give less support and allow the child to direct the play. Julie Fisher writes, the skill of the early years educator is planning appropriately for both adult-led and child-led learning to take place alongside each other in the learning day. Observation itself will save time in planning because activities will be matched to the child's stage of development and will not be too easy or too difficult. By knowing that child and knowing where they are and having observed where they are, you will understand what the next steps need and what that child will need put in place to be able to help achieve those steps. You know what they need developmentally, and you can ensure that the experience that you're going to offer next will meet that need. Adult-focused learning tends to be differentiated by input, and open-ended experiences which are child-led will be differentiated by outcome. Adult-focused learning tends to be recognised by how you plan for something and how you set up a play invitation. And child-led experiences are open-ended, so there's no expected outcome. When the child starts to lead the play, we don't really know. We could start off sitting in a bus and we could end up in a space rocket. That is the way children are. As the learning unfolds throughout the experience, the child decides who experiences what and where that experience takes us all. So the majority of your days should be child-led, and early childhood experts agree that in early years, the majority of the child's learning days should be child-led. and acknowledges the child's successful learning from birth. It offers learning opportunities that are not capped or limited by the adult's expectation. It enhances self-confidence and self-esteem in the children. It helps to unleash their curiosity and the power of inquiry. Everybody knows that children love to ask questions, and it leads to a desire to be a learner for life, because by fanning that spark of curiosity in the child, it becomes a fire, and the child always wants to learn more. Try to make your learning day as interrupted as possible. Start with the routines of your day. Which parts must you follow? Which parts are flexible? Do you have to take the children to school or pick up from nursery? What happens at lunchtime? When the learning day is compartmentalised too much and put into little boxes, it can stop children from learning. And moving from one learning focus to another can mean the child does not grasp the concept of what you were trying to show them, or mastered a skill to their own satisfaction, which leads to frustration. So it might be that you're ready to move on to the next thing that you've organised, but the child doesn't want to do that because they want to stay where they are, because they're enjoying it and they feel they're trying to achieve something that they've not quite grasped yet. Having long and uninterrupted periods also means that appropriate time can be given to different ways in which children will be learning during their day. Child-led learning takes considerably longer than adult learning to reach a satisfactory conclusion. If you think about it, when we set something up, we always have a kind of idea in our mind of the timeline of how long it will take for that ice to melt, for, you know, the penguin that you've actually frozen in the freezer the night before, how long it takes to melt. But when children start a play stream, it can be continuous and can take 30, 40 minutes to get going to the child's satisfaction, and then they want to continue it from there. So there needs to be time in the day for child-led learning to take the time it takes. And conversely, the adult-led agenda needs to be short, sharp and focused. Adult-led and child-led learning can take place alongside each other, and the joy of having adult-led and child-led learning together, playing alongside each other in the learning day, is that children remain motivated and engaged in their own self-chosen challenge. But it gives you, the childminder, time to really focus on the adult-led task. However, the status of child-led learning will only be upheld if, once the adult-led activity is completed, you allow yourself to move back and observe and perhaps engage in what is happening with the child and allow them to lead that play. Next slide, please. And back to you, Katrina.
Yeah. Okay, so you might be thinking all the way through this, how does pedagogical leadership apply to me? The majority of you will be working alone. You'll not be necessarily leading a team of practitioners. Some of you may have, an assistant, but I would imagine most of you are working on your own. However, you are all pedagogical leaders. And I think if you think of your work in relation to this quote from Juno Sullivan, so a pedagogical leader is someone who understands how children learn and develop and makes this happen, taking account of every element of the service from home to school, including significant relationships at home, at school and within the wider community. So I think you can see how that would apply to your childminding role. And I think also, and as Susanna mentioned earlier, thinking about that important role as a pedagogical leader with your families, sharing with your families the approach that you're using, helping them to understand the importance of supporting children's play, and building those really strong relationships are all part of that leadership role that you have. All right. Now we're going to get you to put your thinking hats on a wee bit, I think, aren't we?
We are.
So Susanna, do you want? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's take a wee minute and think about the difference between leadership and management. And we all manage our own services as sole traders. Some of us may have assistants, but the majority may be sole traders, so lone workers. But you are still leading your own service. You're still running your own business. And there are other things that are attached to that take time and are important. But for this, we would just like you to have a look at the different tabs that we have on the board, on the slide here, and decide what you think is leadership and what you think is management.
So maybe should I just read them out? I'll just go through them and then
Yeah.
we'll reveal, we'll do the great reveal. So we've got writing policies and risk assessments. Is that leadership or management? Passion, ensuring health and safety legislation is followed, reviewing planning, a sound knowledge and understanding of how young children develop and learn, monitoring the quality of your provision, sharing good practice, controlling your budgets, and professional values. So which ones of those do you think? I don't know whether we can get people to pop into the chat. I think we've got a very large number of people on the call, so it may just fill up the chat. So maybe what I'll do is just reveal them and you can sort of see if you think this matches what you thought. So the first one we've picked out is passion. That's sound knowledge and understanding of how young children develop and learn. Monitoring the quality of your provisions, part of your pedagogical leadership. Sharing that good practice. So hopefully you will have links with other childminders, but you're also sharing that with your families as well. And it's really important, I think, as a childminder to have that network of other professionals that you are able to discuss and talk to and share ideas with. And I know lots of you meet up throughout your week with other childminders. And then finally, your professional values. So those are all the bits that we would identify as leadership. The other parts are important and they're an important part of your role, but they fall more into that management side of things. Suzanne, is there anything else you want to add to that slide? I think Susanna's mic's off, so I'll just go on to the next one. So this is just thinking again. So sorry, Susanna, did you want to add anything there?
Yes, I just wanted to say that we all know at the moment that we are really under pressure from lots of different sides about paperwork and all the different things all the different asks from all the different places. But the most important thing that we always have to remember is that we need to put the children at the centre, and that is the most important thing. That there has to be balance, but without the passion and the desire to move forward, it will become a grind. You have to find your passion, find your spark, use that curiosity with the children, because it is what we do as childminders is such a joyful thing. And I think it's really important that we remember that by helping children and being leaders within our own service, that everybody wins from that, but particularly the children do.
Absolutely, and you're quite right. It's not been an easy time, and there's lots of, I don't think anyone's passion is probably ensuring health and safety legislation is followed.
No.
It's important that we
True.
do it, but it's focusing on the child at the centre of everything. So just finally, to kind of round things up, pedagogical leadership, what is important? So empowering children, creativity and innovation, that high quality learning and teaching. And although you might not think of yourself as offering learning and teaching, you are. That's what's happening during your day. Children are learning and you're teaching them things. Relationships are at all levels, effective communication and consultation. You'll be doing that with children and with your families, and those positive role models. So you're a real important role model for the children that are part of your childminding setting. Having that shared vision, so shared with your families and the children, and that self-evaluation and monitoring that you're doing on an ongoing basis, all important parts of pedagogical leader. And then, it's in a fancy reveal box, linking research and practice. And that's really what we've been trying to offer you here this evening, that link between your day-to-day practice and that research that's backing it up, that you'll be finding as you're looking at realising the ambition. So we've now got an opportunity for people to ask questions, and people can either put their hands up or can pop into the chat any questions, and we will attempt to answer some of them. What I'm going to do before we start the questions is just go on to the feedback form, and many of you filled in the feedback form for the last session, and it was really helpful, and we hope that we've addressed some of the things that came up in that form, but it really helps us planning for future sessions if you wouldn't mind doing that. So the QR code is there, and what I will do is pop the, if I can copy it, pop the code, the link into the chat as well for you, and we would be absolutely delighted if you wouldn't mind filling in that form for us, and that gives us feedback and lets us know if we're really kind of meeting your needs. Great. So any people got any questions that they would like to ask? I know we had a few questions people wanted to ask last time, and we kind of ran out of time, but we do have a bit of time just now for any questions to be asked. We've stunned everybody into silence,
Yes,
Susanna.
stunned them. I'm actually quite surprised at that because I've never met a shy childminder.
Oh, fantastic. I saw a hand up, but it's gone away. Yes, no, there were lots of questions last time, and we really did just not have enough time for them all, which is why we kind of planned to have that time tonight. Nobody's got their hand up.
Oh, there's Hazel.
Hazel, in you come.
Right. Hi. It's just you mentioned a couple of times during the course of the slides that the
Oh, we've lost your. Sorry, Hazel, we lost your voice there.
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now. Yeah.
It's what is meant by socially constructed with regards to the curriculum of excellence. Just need a wee bit more explanation about that.
Absolutely.
Mentioned it a couple of times. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. We use these terms and sometimes assume that everybody knows what they mean. So Lev Vygotsky really was the first sort of researcher to really look at social constructivism. So what it means is that the way that we learn is through social interactions. So if you just put a child in a room, they wouldn't learn anything because there were no adults there or other children. But if you put them in a space with other adults or with other children, then that's where the learning happens. So it's about those social relationships, and that's why when we talk about the curriculum being socially constructed, it happens in relationship with other children and with the adults that are involved in that. So it's kind of recognising that important role that everybody has within that process. So although the child is learning, it's not enough just to let the child play freely. It's really important that they have lots of time to play freely, but it's also important that there are times where we support and extend. So that's what we mean by social constructivism. It's a fancy term meaning relationships really, and learning within relationships with others.
Wow, lovely. Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking that question, because I bet you were not the only person sitting wondering what we were talking about. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Lorna Blair would like to know, is there room for play invitations and loose parts provision?
Well, I think loose parts provision is a play invitation. Yeah,
Yes.
all of its own, really. Absolutely. But yes, I mean, if you, for instance, have gone to the beach and you've picked up shells, then those shells become part of your loose parts provision, and they might take the play in a very different direction from maybe if you'd been to the forest and you'd picked up pine cones. So I don't know, Lauren, if you want to come on the mic and ask if there was something specific you wanted to ask about that, but I think really loose parts are a wonderful invitation for children.
That's fine, because I detest like these things that people refer to as play invitations, where it's all set up and I'm not quite sure what the children are supposed to do with it. So that's fine. I won't be doing play invitations. I haven't been, and so I can pat myself on the back for not doing them so far.
Yeah.
I've basically got lots of, or I call them loose parts, with a few cars and a couple of dolls thrown in, and that's it.
Do you know, I think it's about the terms that we use, isn't it? And it's, you know, I think, I suppose an invitation can be thought of as something that invites children to learn. So all of your environment really is an invitation for children. I absolutely agree with you about things that people will spend hours preparing, like Susanna mentioned, and the children are interested for 10 seconds. And, you know, it looks nice to the adult, but is it drawing the child in? Is it inviting to the child? So, I mean, sometimes people use the word provocation there to provoke play. I mean, I think just thinking about the interactions, experiences and spaces actually just helps us think about that. But yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with you. I think people shouldn't waste their time going on Pinterest or going on, I mean, and having always...
I always do think of it as the brown box, you know, at Christmas time when kids get tons and tons of presents and they end up playing with the box. I always feel it's a bit like that, you know, where, you know, you could set it up, you could spend an hour setting it up, you know, freeze penguins and ice the night before and, you know, do all that kind of stuff, and it looks wonderful. And the kids come in and, you know, it lasts 30 seconds and then they're over in a corner and they're arguing over who gets to play with the yellow piece of Lego because they're building a whole thing around that yellow bit of Lego, or you know, a stick that they found. So to me, the curiosity really from the child is the play invitation.
That's fine.
Absolutely.
That's fine.
And I think somebody else's tough trays are a bit similar.
They're so beautifully set up, and I think that must have taken them hours.
And I just think
like carbonara in 10 seconds.
We just need to stop looking at these pictures and beating ourselves up and thinking, oh, I'm not doing that, I must be doing something wrong. Actually, you know, it's not about doing that. It's not about spending the whole evening before preparing tough trays to look beautiful. That will be taken off in a completely different direction by the children. That's not what you should be spending your time doing. Martine is saying, I think there should be a balance between adult-led and child-led activities, and absolutely, I think it is about finding that balance. I think what's important is that a lot of the adult role is in supporting or developing that play. And again, I think if you're spending lots of time getting different activities set up, then is that the best use of your time? If you have some really good loose parts or different kinds of, you know, Lego, dolls, all different kinds of things for children to play with. You know, you know that if you go to the beach, you don't have to take any more than a bucket and spade with you, and the children can play there for hours without you, because there's so much in that beach, the sand, the water, the stones, the shells, that they make their play out of actually quite small things, and they can be fully and deeply absorbed in that. Turid's saying, I heard someone say once, if you spend longer setting it up than the children spend playing with it, then it's not the right activity. Absolutely. I would really agree with that. So it is that balance between the two things. But I would say that if you're spending your time setting up open-ended experiences for children, then that is going to provide much more opportunity for children to play than if you are going to be sort of setting up a specific activity that has a beginning and an end. I mean, there are some things that I would call an activity that are brilliant, like baking and cooking, you know, and if you're, you know, doing that in your setting, then that's
That's
quite
adult-led.
adult-led. It is
Yeah.
adult-led, and it's a really
Yeah.
excellent experience for children.
And I think as well, even thinking of something like reading a book starts off as an adult-led. I mean, if you've got 2-year-olds, the chances are they're not going to be able to read the book. They can look at the pictures and can make up their own stories, but they can't read the words. But if you're reading the words and you're explaining what's happening in the book, that will actually, to me, that then becomes a bigger activity, because if you're reading a book about animals, you know the children are going to start making animal noises. They want you to make animal noises. Then they become the animal. So what started out as a child-led activity actually ends up being, started out as an adult-led activity, actually ends up being a child-led activity. So the two kind of mesh really well together.
And I think you're absolutely right there, Susanna. It's that allowing it to be flexible and allowing it to go in a different direction. You might have just set out with the intention of reading the story, and something piques that child's interest. And then if you can then respond and think, well, there was animals. Oh, I know I've got a box of animals in the cupboard, and get the box of animals out, and you can then extend and develop, and the child will take that on. In some ways, those are the best kinds of activities. We've got lots of people sort of responding. I think mostly people sort of agreeing with this sort of discussion that we're having. Best to base planning around children's experiences, their interests, absolutely. Because when you're basing your planning around their interests, then you know you will have motivated children, because they will want to follow those experiences. If you've got a sort of set plan for what you want to do, it will be very frustrating both for you and for the children, because they won't necessarily want to do it. You'll also find as well that you'll have children of very varying ages, and at times you'll have school-aged children in your settings, and they'll want to do very, very different types of experiences. So having those open-ended opportunities for children means that they can engage with the resources. The way that a 3-year-old would engage with Lego would be really different from, say, an 8-year-old coming in after school. So but they are really open-ended materials that will allow the children to engage with them at the level that they're at.
And I think as well, it's choice. I mean, someone has mentioned, some children, love quite well set up, pieces of work, and that's fine. I think that, that what we have to remember is that's absolutely okay if there are children that come in and they want to play with that. So I'm kind of thinking, for example, if you had made like a big dinosaur, mounds of earth and grass, and you'd put dinosaurs in it, children play with it. Some children may play with it and love it. But I think what we're trying to say is that not every child might do that, and it is dependent on the child. And that we don't spend so much time building something that we think, no, you're going to play with that because I've spent all this time making that. That we just always remember that it's the child that leads that experience. And someone's asked if any tips for children who struggle to play on their own, and seem bored, if not directed to an activity. They just whine or start to throw things or shouting because they're bored. Well, throwing actually is a schema. That's a trajectory schema. They are learning something from that. But I think it's persistence, and I think someone earlier on in the chat had mentioned you just have to find, what a child is interested in, what piques their curiosity and their interest. And you'll only find that by giving them lots of different opportunities, and by observing them and catching those verbal and non-verbal cues from them. And that's what Childminders are so good at, because, it's a smaller environment. We're far more able to observe children, and we get to know children really well. So it's good to be able to pick up those verbal and non-verbal cues.
And I think as well, I think one of the things that we are seeing in lots of different types of settings is that children who have been living through the pandemic have maybe had less opportunities to be in social environments, and so are, find it harder to sort of be in a group or to play in a way that we might think is constructive. So actually it may be that you need to do some work alongside the child and modeling for the child, and if you, there's nothing wrong with directing a child to an activity. I'm seeing Lizzie's question here. It's that's fine. You know, if that's what a child needs, I think what's important is that it's about recognizing what each individual child needs, and not every child needs the same thing. So if you're recognizing that child's needs, then it's about finding things that are going to click with that child as you know them. Now, I think we're almost up with our time really, but we've got one more question, and I don't know whether you might have something, Susanna, to answer this. Is there a list of basic resources or areas that a childminder should have ready for varying interests?
There are certainly some publications out there. The Ken Inspectorate have got loose parts play, and I mean, I would think for resources in areas that you're looking at, you know, you would be looking at having like a reading area, you know, somewhere that children can access books, maybe a wee comfortable area they can sit, cushions, etc. You know, but what you have to remember is that each childminding service is individual, and it's individual because it will be a different size, it will be a different shape. You know, it may be that you have a small Kallax unit that's got like 4 spaces in it. You might have your toys, you know, like set out in little like dishes and bowls. You've got to find out what works best for you and your environment. And that's what makes childminding so unique. We are all different, and our services do look different. So I think it's more about finding out what the children are interested in and having a wee think about what you're comfortable with and you think that children would be able to play with safely. And I always, as a rule of thumb, would say, try to make sure that whatever you have is accessible to all the children. So there's not any point putting, you know, like Lego in a box that, you know, is far too high for a child to reach, because it may be while you're reading a book with 2 of the other children, that child wants to play with Lego. So let them go and play with the Lego, but they can't do that if they can't gain access to it. So just have a wee think about your environment. Think how children can gain access to things. And sometimes I think we want to fill space. So maybe pare it back and don't think about filling the space too much.
And I think as well, just thinking about, you know, we talked earlier about how children learn and thinking about those kinds of opportunities. So you want to think about things that will develop literacy, numeracy, things that will develop children's health and well-being, and all aspects of that. So opportunities for movement, opportunities for sensory play. And actually, if you have a look at realising the ambition in section 2, I think it is, starting strong, there's a whole section in there, and it's not lists of resources, but it tells you, you know, what I need as a young child. So it's speaking from the child's voice, asking, this is what I need from you as the adults. And I think if you look at those statements, and it starts from a baby and then a sort of toddler and then a sort of slightly older child, you'll be able to pick out from that the kinds of things that then might meet the child's needs. And you're wanting to think about the whole development of the child and different kinds of resources that will meet the child's development. And I think, you know, Susanna's right, each setting's very different, and it's a bit different from, you know, a nursery setting. There's more standardized sort of equipment that you might have in a nursery, but this is your home, and actually your home is a rich learning environment, and you certainly don't want to be having a sand tray in your living room, you know. So it's about thinking about how you can provide experiences in a flexible way that suits you.
And remember, outdoors. I always feel as if outdoors is the biggest classroom in the world, and most childminders that I know are very rarely in, to be perfectly honest. I'm always quite surprised by, you know, the amount of resources they have when they spend the majority of their time outside.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for all of your comments and questions. I think that's been a really helpful session and really lovely to interact with you and be able to answer some of those questions. We're going to finish the session, and thank you so much for coming and joining us this evening. Our third session is on the 2nd of November, and Susanna, tell me of the title. I can't remember.
It's Transitions.
It's about transitions, and that's
about transitions
with yourself and with Shan Neal. So if you haven't booked for that, look out for that one and book for that one if you want to come along to that. So thank you very much.
Lovely to see everyone.
And enjoy the rest of your evening. And please fill in the evaluation form.
Thank you, everyone.